Hey up you lot, how we doing? So obviously by the title of the video I'm going to look today at some of the grooviest of the whole groovy occult era. And if you don't know what I'm on about, it's kind of something I'm obsessed with. This like late 60s, early 70s explosion in everything from like esoteric Eastern teachings, traditional witchcraft, Satanism. It all kind of exploded as the groovy age of Aquarius kind of started. One thing that was like a big part of it was people being panicky that there were covens in your neighbourhood, and books like The Devil in the Suburbs told us all about it, and then books like Black Magic Today kind of told us how to do it, in fact. So I wanted to look at some LPs from that era that are very occult. Now there are some that some key recordings and releases from that time that I don't have on LP. Stuff like the Crowley recordings, A Witch is Born, the Alexanders. Kind of it's a whole ritual that was recorded. As much as I love stuff like that, the LPs are quite expensive, and they're an interesting and important audio document that I do want in my overall collection. But some of them are quite expensive on LP, and I can probably get another couple of LPs that I'll listen to a lot more. So they're not really in this video because it's stuff that I need to have on LP. I just want to talk about the records rather than this was a record. You know, I don't want to talk about stuff I haven't necessarily got on LP and pretend like I have. So let's kick off. The first one I'm going to look at is like I think the least occulty, but it always comes up whenever anybody's kind of getting into this kind of era of occult music. It always comes up. And that's Witch Burning by Salem Mass. Now, if you're going to listen to this, I hope you like Moog solos. Or is it Moog? It's Moog, isn't it? I always pronounce that wrong. I hope you like Moog solos, because that's what you're going to get. Now, this is a reissue. The original was a private press from 1971, I do believe. This is a reissue on the Akama label, which is a great label that does some really cool reissues of stuff. So Salem Mass only has 2 witchy type songs on their album, the first 2, Witch Burning and My Sweet Jane, and then it kind of goes into a very cool kind of psych rock type band with some really up-tempo stuff, which is very good. But if you come into this one in like sinister occult type sounds, we're going to get to some of those in a bit. What is it? Bear Tree on side 2. That's not occult, but it's very, very like gloomy and fun and lovely. And I do believe legend has it that this was recorded kind of in a bar after it had closed. And they'd actually got one of the first Moog synths. So I think they had number 23 on this one. And they were obviously wanting to utilise that sound as much as possible. And just about every track on this album has either a great Moog solo or a kind of strange, discordant Moog solo. The first track, Witch Burning, is about 10 minutes long, I think. Yeah, 10 minutes, 24 seconds. And it's about essentially a witch burning, and then My Sweet Jane, the second track, is about somebody pretty much being in love with somebody that gets accused of being a witch. Other than that, It's quite deceptive, guys. You're not going to get a whole lot of groovy, witchy stuff off that. Next up is probably the oldest one on this list, from 1965. It's the Watersons, Frost and Fire, a calendar of ritual and magical songs. Now, I'm not a huge folk fan. I haven't got a lot of folk records. This is very, very folky. It's all, it's just 4 people singing. One of the tracks has a drum on it, but there's no other instruments or anything like that. But it's really cool. I really like it. So what this is, this was released on the Topic label in 1965. And it explains everything on the back. This is like a calendar of pre-Christian, pagan, and early Christian. So when we still had pre-Christian festivals, but they'd become Christian. If you're interested in this, you know all about that. And it explains really well everything, every reason. And there's some odd songs that I wouldn't have picked as kind of ritual songs from the pre-Christian period. Here We Come a Wassailing, John Barleycorn, stuff like that. But there's some absolutely great kind of, I don't listen to it loads, but when I've got that little kind of Wicker Man vibe going on, then this bad boy goes on. And it's a bit, maybe it's my copy that's a bit warm, but it sounds a little bit rough. It's not kind of top flight studio recordings, but yeah, the people singing, it sounds amazing and slightly sinister. So and again, these are all on online. They're on Spotify or YouTube or wherever you get your digital music from. You can kind of find them and have a listen. Maybe hopefully I'm giving you some ideas of other things to listen to. Let's stick with the folk vibe and drop in one of the heaviest of heavy hitters of occult music. And that's Komas' First Utterance. Again, not an original, this is a reissue. Now, this was Komas' first album. And I think they recorded a second album, but it didn't really come to much. Then they tried again in the 70s. But I don't think they ever captured the kind of sinister joy of this album. And it's a heck of a sleeve. Let's open it up so you guys can have a look. I'll show you the inside. Not as good as the outside. And it's like acid folk. And again, legend has it. I'm not quoting 100% definite facts here. This is just me having a little poke around online. But these guys lived in a commune and rehearsed and recorded stuff together. And I can't always understand everything about this album. It's beautiful and haunting and disturbing. Roger Wotton, the lead singer, kind of lurches from actual nice vocals to sounding like a screeching goblin, like he's been kicked out of the Lollipop Guild for some nefarious activities. And I've always seen this LP as a bit of a puzzle. There's kind of like, you've got to read a lot into it. There's more going on lyrically than is first apparent. Honestly, I couldn't pick a standout track, and I don't see this album as individual tracks. This album to me feels like one complete entity in itself, but it's insanely good, and the musicianship and songwriting is tremendous, and it's unusual and inventive and dark in a pagan, pre-Christian, Wicker Man kind of way. Obviously, the relationship between any kind of occult thought and rock music, especially heavy metal, is like intrinsically linked, totally. But I'm not like a huge metal fan, so that's obviously a video for somebody else to do, and I'm sure somebody's already done it. It covered that relationship and everything that kind of fits together there. Obviously, there are more mainstream bands that have done more occulty type stuff, you know, like the Stones, and there's obvious Led Zeppelin type connections. Even bands like the Crazy World of Arthur Brown, that LP, there's certainly some kind of God versus devil imagery in all that kind of thing. My introduction to it, and I can remember it as clear as day, I was sat in my mum and dad's living room in their old house, and I can't remember what show I was watching, but I saw this.
Can you see the witch? Can you see the witch? Can you see the witch by my side? Can you see the witch? Can you see the witch? Can you see the witch by my side?
And it showed me that the thing I wanted to know about, the thing I was interested in, that even as a kid drove me to discover more, was out there. And at the time, I was like, that's like English witchcraft. Oh, that's amazing. And I know the Rattles aren't even English, but young me didn't know that at the time. But I found the whole thing so fascinating and compelling, and that's what sparked that interest in me in this kind of stuff. So we better have a look at another LP here, aren't we? So next up, we've got another slightly deceptive one, and that's Sacrifice by Black Widow. Now, I'm not saying it's deceptive in the fact that it doesn't talk about occult things, because this is very, very, very kind of satanic. How cool is that? Oh, let's put it that way up. But musically, if Austin Powers was a devil worshipper, this is what he would dance to. It is so groovy, and it looks like something a bit more rocky than it actually is. There's a lot of very groovy Hammond solos. I think it's a Hammond, I'm not sure. It's that kind of 60s keyboard sound. There's an awful lot of almost like freeform jazz flute solos. It almost goes into lounge territory, kind of like Girl from Ipanema type groovy lounge. It's so odd. And it starts off with like a kind of long keyboard organ dirge. And honestly, you think it's going to be something a bit harsher than it is, and it's essentially loungecore. It reminds me a lot of another album that starts with a bit of a long keyboard dirge that promised more to a lot of people than it actually delivered. Actually, it reminds me a lot of this album. This is, if you don't know this one, this is Opus Eponymous by Ghost. And I don't want to get into all the hate for Ghost in the comments. There seems to be a lot of hate for Ghost on YouTube. And their newer stuff, I'm not quite as into. But I think this groovy disco occult is splendid. And it's a lot like this album. And no amount of dark lyrics, like come to the Sabbath, Satan's there, is going to detract from some really good and competent flute solos and easy kind of lounge jazz drumming and a funky keyboard. I think it's wonderful. I love listening to this album. But don't expect something dark and heavy and ominous. So that came out in 1970. And it did quite well. It got to number 32 in the album charts, I think in the UK. But Black Widow found it difficult to break through because the lyrics are so satanic. It's very odd, isn't it? It is really satanic lounge music. The lyrics are so satanic. They had a lot of bookings cancelled. People refused to stock, like record shops refused to stock the album. People were afraid of the album. So for the next couple of albums that they did, they kind of dropped the whole devil worship thing and went more of a traditional rock lyrics type route. And I don't think they ever recaptured the majesty of Sacrifice. So let's temper that with something that is tremendously ominous. And that's Dracula. In Cauda Semper Stat Venenum. Now, this album is wonderfully, pretentiously recorded in Latin. All the lyrics are in Latin. Dracula were an Italian band. And so their Latin is with an Italian accent. And I don't speak Latin, but you can tell that there's dark and ominous intent with this album. Now, they moved from Italy to London to record and release their second album, which I haven't got. As I've said before, like original releases, not even a first pressing, just an original release of a lot of this kind of stuff is so hard to find. There was, I think this is the original recording. So there was, because this is a 2014 reissue. There's a 2001 reissue that the band don't seem to like that much, because a lot's been added. This still sounds stripped back. This is the one on Black Widow Records. And I think this is the original. Every digital version I've listened to that says it's dated 1969 when this album came out is identical to this one and hasn't got additional keyboards and sounds added to it. But this is... It kind of gets described, I think, as like proto-Doom, just with the like dirgy organs and like long held ominous distorted guitar chords. It's sometimes lumped in with prog stuff when you check it out online and stuff, but it's the most like sinister intent I've ever heard. It's almost like they set out to record an occult album that is gonna unsettle and frighten people, and it's been an absolute favourite of mine for years and years. Well worth checking out. And it's, like I said, digitally. Just have a look on YouTube. You're obviously watching YouTube right now, so just have a look on YouTube. And last but not least, I couldn't do a video about groovy occult LPs without talking about Coven. Witchcraft destroys minds and reaps souls. Now, this is another Akama reissue, and they've done a lovely job on this. It's a heavy stock card sleeve. You get the little lyric book and kind of explanation things inside. There the guys, look. And this is just such a cool LP. So it is early rock. It came out in 1969. So it's not like metal. It's very much kind of 60s rock rather than, it hadn't developed into that like full-on metal thing by this point. All the songs on this are very much witchcrafty based. There are links to Black Sabbath, and the first track on the album is called Black Sabbath. The bass player was called is it Osborne? But it's just a mad coinky dink. But yeah, for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge is a good one, packed with Lucifer. Dignitaries of Hell is a belter. And then they round the album off with like a 13-minute satanic mass. There's no music in it. It's just a recording of a satanic mass. It's absolute genius. Now, this album was... obviously, it was very controversial when it started to gather momentum when it first came out. And I haven't been able to find the photo, but allegedly there's a photograph of Charles Manson holding this record outside a record shop, which contributed to record shops not stocking it and everything like that. And eventually, as far as I can tell, it was withdrawn. Now, I don't want to get into the whole Manson thing. There's a lot been kind of said and written about it. But during that era, the whole fear of witchcraft and the occult was very, very real. And some of the stuff I've read about his trial, the judge warned the jury not to stare directly into his eyes because they hadn't managed to establish what level of power he had, and they thought it was like, the almost like spiral eyes hypnosis thing. So yeah, the jury were warned not to look directly into his eyes. He was tried as like a wizard. Mad. Another interesting thing about this album is a lot of people seem to claim, and I'm not disputing that, I'm just going on what other people have said, that this was the first example of somebody doing that in rock, which is like the rock salute now, isn't it? So yeah, this is I think about as rocky as any of these get, and it's full on devil worship. We're coming for your soul, And here's a satanic mass that you can practice in the comfort and safety of your own home. So before we go, let's just check out what Victor's been up to this week. He's been helping me read some Peter Tremaine novels for an upcoming video. I'll message you back, Cthulhu P. I was already on it. It's crazy, but I was already on it. So thank you for watching, guys, and I hope you've enjoyed having a little look through some of my occult favourites with me. And if you don't know any of these and you want to check them out, like I said, they're all online digitally, easy to find. So have a little listen and get into that groovy era of devil worship and witchcraft and paganism and everything that's fun about the late 60s and early 70s. So thank you for watching, guys, and I will see you lovely folks in the next video.